The next thing that we want to do is decide on our colors. So I have 5 out here today. I have 2 yellows, my red, a green, and a blue. And I just want to kind of run through my thought process when I am deciding what colors I'm going to use, just so that if you struggle with that, knowing what colors to use, this will be beneficial to you. Now let me say this, I try to stick with a limited palette so that I don't have 15 or more colors sitting around me and get confused with which blue or which yellow that maybe I used in a certain part of the painting. So I just pull out only the colors I want to use, then I start testing them out, and once I feel comfortable with the colors that I've chosen, then I move on. So I decided to try quinacridone gold for this center color of the flower. It's kind of a warm yellow color. And I was thinking that quinacridone rose just might be the color that I'm looking for. So I put some down on my paper and I put a good little stretch of it on there. Some of the areas I'll make a little bit darker, some I'll make a little bit lighter. Then I will move that over toward the actual flower itself. Now, I compared this to the flower on my computer screen so that I could get a closer idea of the color I'm going to need. Now on here, this doesn't look exact, but if you want to go by your printed image, this is something that you can do to get the color a little more like what is here. I'm going to add a little bit of red into that, which is the magenta. You may hear me refer to it as magenta throughout the tutorial. Sometimes I might call it my red, but if you think of the primaries, yellow, red, and blue, if I say red, you'll know I mean magenta. So I put that little bit of magenta in there, and it's already turning it more of a color closely related to what's in my printed image. Okay, then as you look at some of these petals out here in the surrounding area, they're kind of blue, but then they have some purple and some pink. So I felt like either quinacridone rose, quinacridone violet, or quinacridone magenta was going to be best suited for the other petals. So I tried the rose, it was not quite right. I tried the violet, it was too purple. But then when I tried the magenta, it was more close to what I felt like I needed. Now some of the areas in these petals kind of have a purpley look to them, so I'm adding just a wee little touch of the phthalo blue. That was a little bit too much, but you'll get the idea. When I mix the magenta and the phthalo blue together, you can see I have that kind of pinky purpley look that is going to go into some of these petals. Okay, so then the nickel azo yellow, I decided to use 2 yellows because the quinacridone gold is a little different than the nickel azo yellow. Let me just put these side by side. I felt like for the background, our initial wash that's going to go underneath the leaves, that the quinacridone gold was going to be a little bit too dark, too orangey. I wanted something a little more vivid, so that's why I decided to use the quinacridone, the nickel azo yellow, because when you compare the two side by side, you can see that the quin gold is a little warmer gold than the nickel azo yellow, and the nickel azo yellow is a little more vibrant and bright, kind of like a lemony yellow. Then I thought about the background. So these are the colors that we're using for the majority of the flower. And yes, you can mix your own greens. So if you do not have sap green, don't worry about it. I will show you here in just a second how you can mix your own green. So when I look at this green and then I compare it to, let me put it over here. And again, the color here is much more muted than what is on my screen. So this is going to look way off. And it is a little bit bright, but I'm still going to use it by itself, probably as my second wash, and then come back with some of my more muted colors. But let's say that I want to tame this green down a little bit. I can take a little bit of the phthalo blue and throw that in there, and that's going to darken it up some. It's going to take a little bit of the freshness out, but if I want to do that even more, I can pick up some of the magenta, throw some magenta in there, and that's going to help give me a little more earthy green. And depending on how much of the blue and the magenta you put in there will determine kind of where it goes. I could also, and who's to say that I won't, add some of the quinacridone gold in there. That can warm it up if I feel like that is a necessity. Okay, so let's use our nickel azo yellow, and I want to show you how you can mix your own green. Take some of the nickel azo yellow, and I'm going to plop that right out here on my scrap paper. I'm going to grab some of the blue, and I'm just grabbing some off of the side of the tube here where it's kind of gotten squished out from under the lid. So I'm mixing these two together. As you can see, it's kind of the same color as the sap green was at first. I can mix more of the yellow in there and change it up a little bit. And just like I did before, I can always use my magenta to help darken it up and give it more of an earthy color. And again, depending on how much of that I put in, I can even go really kind of a brown green if I need to. So if you don't have sap green and you don't want to buy it, then just simply mix yellow, blue, and your red together to get a green. And it might be something you have to play around with a little bit, but do just like I'm doing right here. Get you a scrap piece of paper, start playing around with your colors, and here's what you can do as well. Let me grab a little pen right here. Sometimes when I'm experimenting, I may put that I used my nickel azo yellow. That was the first color that I used. And then I put my phthalo blue next, and I added my quinacridone magenta. And yeah, I didn't add anything else, did I? Okay, so I will put a note to myself that that is what I used in here. And I list it in order as to what I did first, second, and third, but also I list it in which had the larger quantity. So I feel like I added for this color more of the magenta than I did the blue and the yellow. Not a lot, but the sequence that I put them in also helps me think, okay, I need to add a little more of the magenta to get this color. All right, so that is how I go about deciding my colors. I just swatch it out on paper. I hold it close to my image or to my computer screen, and sometimes I'll tape the paper to my computer screen when I have my image on there. I will step back away from it and look, and that kind of helps me to determine if I'm on the right path with my colors or not. So that's how I decided which colors to use here. And so yeah, we're just going to stick with 5 colors today. So we're ready to get into our first wash on the background.